The Texans get their first victory Monday of the season as they take down the Titans, getting their first shutout since 2010. We're going to talk about that and more on this edition of The Bullpen.
To throw the punches off. He floats one wide open, and there he goes. Touchdown for a Texan touchdown.
Hello and welcome to this edition of The Bullpen. As always, I'm James Roy, and with me is Tom Chavarria. Tom, how are you doing?
Man, I got to tell you, I'm a little tanner. Just came off a 7-day cruise, Mexico, Honduras. Got to see some cool places, and came home to a Texans dub. Watched the Texans L on a boat, and when I tell you, if you've ever done it, Carnival. I mean, any cruise, but I imagine Carnival's like everyone, all the other ones. You're in there with every fan that ever was. Like it's the craziest thing. They have one area, it's kind of a bar area, and they have all these TVs, and it was Cowboys, it was Texans, it was Eagles, it was Niners, it was you name it, they were in there. The Browns fan was losing his mind. And if you remember 2 weeks ago, the Browns won. They beat the Green Bay Packers, which was just nobody had on their bingo card. And this dude is yelling by himself with a little towel. It's not over the whole game. And it was awesome. It was a really cool story. Me and this Cowboy fan who's sitting at the table across from me are like, props to that Browns fan who was in there on an island by himself, Browns jersey on, just repping his squad. And Packers fans were everywhere. There was tons of Packers fans. So it was just a really, really cool mosh pit of football fans until the Texans lost, and then I just hated everything. Fast forward to this week, we got dub. We're talking about dub.
I was going to say, I didn't know if they had the game on the boat, so I had anticipated you might be able to get away from the misery of watching the Texans flounder until the Jaguars finally found some sign of life late in the game, but unfortunately I had to watch that. I reckon then you were keeping up with the Astros giving up a playoff spot, just a rough week, but it probably took a little edge off of it being on a cruise with, all the amenities and just hanging out with family. So I'm glad that you got to be there, because it was not as much fun watching it happen on land. So
the one thing I love, the one thing that I kind of hate and I kind of love when you're on a cruise, you don't get the same sports interaction. I buy the internet package, but my niece and nephew were on it all day, all night. They're both teenagers, so that's a whole nother story. So I didn't get to stay plugged in like I normally do. There's not ESPN on the boat TVs. I mean, the bar has stuff, but like you're just not watching it as much. Like when you're at home, and it seems like, I don't know about you or all the other guys listening, but some sort of sports is on my TV like all the time. Like I'm really not a big sitcom or show guy. I mean, I'll watch them, but predominantly I'm keeping up with all the things, and I couldn't keep up with the Astros as well because I was on the boat. And then obviously when the Texans lost, I didn't have to hear constantly about, the Texans losing, because I wasn't on Twitter a ton. I wasn't on Insta, wasn't on all the socials. So it kind of shielded me a little bit, but it wasn't great because I'm still like, there's nowhere to vent either.
Yeah, I feel you on that. So let's start with this, because we're going to do positives and negatives first. And since you weren't on the show last week, you missed the just sheer, I don't even know what, indescribable mania, panic, the let's fire Nick Caley, what are our options? And so I just want to get your take on that discussion of if you think that the discussion of firing Nick Caley is premature, and lumped into what your takeaways are from how the game went for the offense this week.
So I knew that Nick Caley was not going to be able to just walk in the door with his playbook in hand, and all of a sudden this offense was just going to be lights out. I knew. We've talked about it on the show numerous times. I knew there was going to be growing pains. We just didn't know how far it would go. One thing that I don't think I saw, I don't know, I don't know if I would have been able to see it, is how the personnel would have shook out. Like, before I left, we talked about Woody Marks, and Woody Marks needed to play more. And, lo and behold, Woody Marks played for more this week, and we kind of like what we saw. I think
Kinda.
yeah, exactly. I'm trying not to bury the lead. Anyway, like I felt like Ursary was the big talking point. The offensive line, we beat that dead horse to no end. I think, I still feel, Ursary's going to have lumps and he's going to be good and then he's going to be bad and we're going to have to be patient and be okay with it. I felt the same way about Woody Marks. I felt the same way about Higgins. I felt the same way about all these young guys, right? Noel, all of them. And I figured they would integrate them slowly. That's what I figured. Some of them right off the bat. Ursary, we're going to put you week 1, wrong position. We're just going to, let's go. Let's see what we can do. And there was some really ugly stuff, but there was some good stuff too. I think Woody, you had options and that was always going to be a thing, right? Dario Bungawale was a thing. And he's a veteran. I truly believe Nick Caley as a rookie had to kind of, have the respect of the veterans. So I believe he leaned on some of the veterans where he could more than the rookies for that reason. Like, all right, I want somebody that's been in the league who's done it to do this stuff initially before I roll in my rookies. So I think that's why we didn't get a ton of Woody Marks. But it did not take long for us to see with our eyes that, hey, Woody Marks might be something. And, 2 weeks ago, I thought, hey, Woody Marks looked good. And we talked about it some. And, the Jacksonville game, I felt like he got a little bit more run, but probably not enough. And then today we fast forward and like, okay, now we're getting what we probably should have gotten from week 1. But I think some of that was on Nick Caley trying to really, install a system, really try to like ease it in and not try to put guys in bad positions. So I was not one of the people that were like, fire this guy, because I knew the dude was a rookie and he was going to struggle. It's just the way it works. It's rare that a guy comes in, and even if he does, it's rare that the success like is long-term. I think there's some guys that, they catch lightning in a bottle for a couple games, but league figures you out and then you got to adjust to that, no different than baseball or any other sport. When a new guy shows up and he's showing you something you hadn't seen, the tape starts to build and then he's got to be able to adjust to the tape because teams are now building against you. Nick Caley, for me in this game, to say all that to say, I really feel like now we're starting to see him get settled in, get comfortable, and the offense showed it. You saw up tempo, which we've been talking about. Maybe we needed to see more from CJ, where it was like, hey, he looks really good in a no huddle. He looks really good into the half. Maybe we start integrating that. I think we saw that this game. You saw more of CJ, I think, making moves at the line, checking in and out of stuff. And I think we need to see more of that too. And I think the offense benefited from it.
And it's fun that you brought that up, because people's biggest talking point has been CJ, you have that control. Where is it at? And D'Amico actually made a comment in the press conference that the play to Jaden Higgins for that touchdown was a play that CJ Stroud checked at the line of scrimmage. So that was an audible that he called to get into that look so that he could hit Jaden Higgins. So we're already starting to see the product of it. But I agree with you. It was always going to be a patience thing. And even if you're sitting here in week 3, week 4, and you still have the let's fire Nick Caley perspective, I covered it last week, but I'll give a recap here for Tom. I mean, you're sitting at a point where you don't want to hire internally because the whole offensive staff pretty much carries over from last season. So you don't like that option. You look externally, who's picking up this job in week 4? Who wants to be set up for failure, having to install a whole new offense at the NFL level? Like that guy is unlikely to get a chance to continue that after this season if it doesn't go well. And so then now you have to look internally. You're looking at Gerard Johnson and Bill Lazor. Gerard Johnson's basically Nick Caley, but didn't get hired this last cycle. And Bill Lazor has had some success and is the veteran offensive coordinator that I think a lot of people might have wanted the Texans to hire. But once again, you're left to that point of how much change can he make? I mean, he's coming in week 4. How much change can you reasonably expect? So the best option for this Texans team, as I concluded last week, is for Nick Caley to get it. And we saw that this week. So look at it, for me, positives and negatives. The big positive is that we saw offensive production. If we look at the previous weeks, what we saw in the first half or the first 3 quarters was basically the first 3 weeks, where it's like, okay, kicked 2 field goals, missed a field goal. The offense kind of moved the ball, but then would, commit a boneheaded penalty. But I mean, to be fair, the first penalty that the Texans got called was like halfway through the second quarter. It was a pretty good stretch, and it was relatively disciplined compared to how the Texans have played before. But we're looking at a team that, for these first 3 quarters looked pretty comparable. And if you look on Twitter, you can tell like that's the fan reaction was like, get this man out of Houston. I don't want to see Nick Caley ever coach another offensive drive ever again. But the big so negative for me was the first 3 quarters, but the big positive, and I think the biggest thing that we can build on, is that in the fourth quarter of this game, the Texans scored as many touchdowns as they had scored in the first 3 games this season. So a huge turnaround for this team. As you spoke to, Nick Caley kind of took a page. He made some adjustments that he's been saying he can make, which is that he saw Woody Marks was doing well. He leaned into that. He, noticed that CJ was doing well and quick. He was getting CJ put in situations where he could make those plays. The O-line stepped up. I don't know if you saw on that Jaden Higgins touchdown, but the pocket looked great. Like the play, everything. And maybe that was on CJ. Maybe CJ called the protection correctly when he audibled the play. I mean, there's a lot of things you can look to. There was a lot of bad things in the first 3 quarters, but and the Titans are not the best team in football. In fact, I'd say they're one of the worst still. So I take it with a grain of salt, but I look at this fourth quarter, and once again, as I've been saying all season, if it can happen once, it can happen again. The Texans are building on what they've put out, and each week we find a new thing where it's like, okay, now we have an offensive explosion. We have the rookies are stepping up and actually contributing. We're starting to find playmakers, and the offense is starting to look alive. So I feel a lot better right now about this Texans offense than I have pretty much the entire season, even though it's the Titans that they were playing. But one of the reasons that could contribute to that, kind of leaning into the next topic, is defensive play calling. I don't know if you saw, but John M. Alexander put out an article. D'Amico Ryans this week. This is the first week ever that he's not called defensive plays since being the head coach for the Texans. So he handed off defensive play calling responsibility to Matt Burke. This is a discussion that we had before you went on your cruise, about how we foresee it. I think that maybe we didn't quite see eye to eye on that, but we can rehash it here. How much do you think it contributed to the Texans' offensive success that D'Amico was not bound to defensive play calling duties?
I think D'Amico would tell you that it didn't affect him. I don't think he has any bearing on the offense whatsoever. I think if you want to talk about, being able to challenge, if you want to talk about timeout usage, if you want to talk about, all of the upper level management stuff, I think D'Amico would tell you, yeah, I had a better grasp of that because I wasn't worried about calling defense. I think he has done enough with Matt Burke to be able to feel like that he understands what he wants as a head coach. I don't believe at any stretch that D'Amico won't input on some of this. I refuse to believe that he's sitting there listening to Matt Burke call plays and just stoic, not saying nothing. If he sees something, he's probably going to say, hey, what do you think about, and they'll confer and be like, no, I really want to. And maybe he's given Matt Burke the grace to say, no, I want to do this. But we won't know that until he comes out and says it. I just really think that nothing on the offensive side of the ball for me is going to be impacted by D'Amico's ability to be plugged into it or whatever. I really don't see him being that kind of guy where he would tell Nick Caley, hey, I want you to run the ball, or tell Nick Caley, hey, I need you to throw the ball. I think he gives him the freedom to, like, if you watch the broadcast, which I mean, I'm sure most of you did, where they're like, hey, you've got 2 plays, on a 3rd and 4 or whatever, I think he gives him that. Where he's already making the decisions on how to manipulate clock management and 3rd and 4th down, stuff like that. We're going to go for it. We're going to kick it. I think those decisions happen quicker now because he has that freedom.
I believe that the impact was probably, I to some extent, I agree with you, probably more indirect than people are saying. I think there are some people that maybe will put too much merit on this decision, but I think that two things to speak to on it is, one, Matt Burke called plays and the defense shut out a team for the first time since 2010. That, I think, speaks volumes to the way Matt Burke has developed under D'Amico Ryans. And I think that it's huge for D'Amico that he can outright say, hey, I'm delegating play calling to you, and he can treat the defense the same way he was already treating the offense. The difference here to me is this, right? The next observation is this. A lot of people maybe put a little too much on what calling defensive plays does to take away from DeMeco's attention, but it is something that will take his attention away. For example, let's look at this. You're watching Nick Caley call plays and you're kind of giving your input. As I've said before, my firm thought was that DeMeco should call defensive plays and should have input to the offense as another perspective, a defensive player who played linebacker and should be able to assess the defense and give Caley a pointer or two on if he sees something, right? So he's doing that, let's say, and let's assume he's still calling defensive plays. It's third down, and now his mind has shifted. It's 3rd and 10. He's not all the way in there on the offensive play calling because now he's got to think, okay, when we punt it, what personnel package grouping do I want to send in? How do I want to approach this next defensive drive? There's things that are in his head as a defensive play caller that he's got to move into mentally. Whereas when he doesn't have to think about that, when Matt Burke is like making the assessment, he's gathering the defensive players and starting to go over game plan. Hey, if the offense doesn't get it here, this the tape would tell us this is what we're looking at. We're probably going to go in with this personnel. So be ready. Now he can, be there with Caley. He's sitting on the sideline and he sees, oh, hey, I've seen this look from, the Titans before. And I think that, this is what we should do, or, hey, we should call a timeout here. I don't think we have the right look on the field for this. Whereas, to me, that's a head coaching decision to look at the offensive configuration relative to the defense and determine we are not ready to run a play right now. Where I don't think the offensive coordinator could make that call, but I think the head coach should make that call. And so I think that this opens up a part of the game that we haven't been seeing, where maybe Nick Caley's, like you said, and like we all know, Nick Caley's a rookie offensive play caller. He's already got enough on his plate trying to figure out how to run an NFL offense. If you're asking Nick Caley to be fully in charge when the offense is on the field, not only is he running the offense, he's making, hey, head coach, DeMeco, I think we should call timeout here. Hey, he's having to make like head coach level decisions because DeMeco has moved on from this offensive drive. He's like, okay, 3rd and 12, I need to prepare the defense to get on the field. So when DeMeco doesn't have to do that, he can now make the head coaching calls, and it frees up Nick Caley to be the offensive coordinator. That's it. That's all he's got to do. He's just got to sit there and make an assessment of what we should do and take input from DeMeco on what DeMeco is seeing. So I think the impact could be massive. I don't know if we can say based off of this game that the impact was massive because it's the Titans. That's really my biggest reservation. I mean, the game looked really good for a whole quarter. And the Texans were up the whole game, but like if we look at those first 3 quarters, that wouldn't give me a lot of reason to believe that it had a huge impact on the game. But when we got into crunch time and when it was time to start moving the ball and scoring touchdowns, I think that we saw something that could be attributed to that. And we need to see if it happens over the course of another game. And I'll tell you this, if it happens against the Ravens, I'm going to start actually buying into what Ryan Fitzpatrick said this past week. Ryan Fitzpatrick on the show Fitz and Wit had said very confidently he thinks the Texans at 0-3 are still a team that's going to make the playoffs. And so I obviously am hyped to hear that from him. As a stats and odds kind of guy, I'm looking at the numbers, and it's not looking like something that is incredibly likely based off of precedent and history. And as someone who loves history and is pretty good at math, logic in me is preparing myself mentally for not seeing the Texans in the playoffs. But if we start to see this decision impact the offense in that way, you're going to see optimistic James Roy rear his ugly head and continue to talk about winning the AFC South, the AFC, the Super Bowl, the whole thing. I mean, so right now that's kind of on reserve.
I don't know what math you're doing. I don't know what math is telling you that it doesn't look possible or plausible or whatever. But to me, the last wild card, if we're just going bare minimum, right? The last wild is 2-2. The Texans are 1 game behind the last wild card. Now I know there's a bunch of teams and time and all that jazz. Yeah, but it was like 2 weeks ago, it was an impossibility, right? 0-3, the numbers say, the logic says you cannot make the playoffs because you're 0-3. And it's like,
it doesn't say it's impossible. It says that it's unlikely, but a combination of history and that math of who has made it means that, and you've pointed this out to me before, right? This is another important fact to look at. We're looking at, history based off of a 16 game season. The 2018 Texans are the only team to go 0-3 and make the playoffs, and they did that in a 16 game season. The NFL has since added another game, which changes the paradigm. It shifts the entire paradigm on what is possible. And you could say that 0-4 is the new 0-3 in this league, depending on how you view it. So I think the Texans drew a very tough schedule to start. There are a lot of factors, lots of reasons to be optimistic, but one of the things that needs to happen for that optimism to be, worth having is this offense to figure out how to play. And so, I mean, I'm glad to see the progression in the right direction, but I need to see, I don't want to say they need to win against the Ravens, but going into the bye week 1-4 does not bode well. Cause I believe statistically, since this era of entering the 17 game, like in that scope of 17 game seasons, I think it's only 5 teams total have made the playoffs after starting 1-3. So I don't even know what the numbers are for 1-4, but I can't imagine it's good. So I still have my optimism. It's not all the way there. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'd have a whole different vibe. I might be more in the camp of fire Nick Caley now if I was like super out on the Texans making the playoffs, but even then, I feel like Tom and I do a pretty good job of reining in those fanatic thoughts when they happen. So I think we're both same general thought process of like Nick Caley just needs some time, and the Texans will probably be fine this season, which is a good place to be. So I think there is hope for this offense. Speaking of offense and rookies and such, all of the touchdowns scored by the Texans in this game were scored by rookies on offense. We kind of got at Woody Marks. Jaden Higgins also had a touchdown. Jalen Noel's been explosive. What do you think, like moving forward, is the progression of that? Do you think that Woody Marks is running back 1 right now? Let's just start with that. Do you think that Woody Marks, here's a 2-part question. Do you think Woody Marks has taken over RB1? And do you think that by the time Joe Mixon is ready, which Diana Rossini has reported, they'll visit that conversation around mid-October? Do you think that by the time Joe Mixon is ready, it could come to a point where Woody Marks could maintain RB1A, 1B, or a more significant or prominent role than Nick Chubb?
So I really believe that the only RB1 is Joe Mixon. I truly believe that. Lion's share that I don't know that you're ever going to see Woody Marks not be, a committee guy. Yeah. I don't think you're going to see him get 20 carries. I don't think you're going to see, like the offense. He's not going to be McCaffrey light. He's not going to do that. I think the hope, right, for me, I think, is what they have in Detroit, where you have basically like 60-40, 50-50, but it's still very much a committee. So now could Woody just absolutely just earn the lion's share? Sure. I don't know, like, if you watch the game and you saw Nick Chubb and I mean, he still averaged 4 yards a carry. I don't see them just getting away from him just because how sexy Woody Marks looked. You know what I mean? I think they want to still have good balance with those guys, keep both guys fresh. The season is now longer by a game. So the RB1, RB2 thing, I mean, if you want to label, sure, there's a potential for him to be, RB1 because he'll average 2 more carries and he'll get 3 more targets a game. But is that really would he tell you he's RB1? Probably not. He'd just be like, look, I'm going to come in, do the best I can, whatever they need me to do, I'm going to do, yada, yada, yada. So I really feel like it's really just a running back by committee. I think that's what it's going to be. I think when Mixon comes back, if Mixon comes back, you're not going to see Chubb go away. I still think you're going to get all 3 running backs. And then it gets really dicey because you want to say, okay, it should just be Woody Marks and Joe Mixon, right? But how do you take what you've seen from Chubb and go, oh, we don't, we're out, like, let's find you somewhere else. Like, that's still a really good running back. And knowing that Mixon is coming off of something, maybe you want to have 3 really good running backs and you want to keep them all healthy. And, it'll be really interesting to see what happens if that plays out.
Yeah. And looking at to me, it's the same discussion that was had with Nick Chubb going into this season. Joe Mixon has been injured before, has been injured for a really long time. How likely is it that he hits the ground running and is the Joe Mixon that basically propelled the Texans through last season? And so looking at it, I think that Woody Marks already has made a significant stride, towards carving out his role in this Texans backfield. I think that his presence begs the question of what to do with that room after this season or even at the trade deadline, depending on how things play out. But looking at the trade deadline, Mixon's value is not really there because of his injury. Nick Chubb is gaining that value. I mean, if Mixon comes back and is worthwhile and creates a situation where Nick Chubb's not getting as many carries, do you look to move on from Chubb? There's a lot of different things in play here. Is there a team running back needy enough to be like, hey, yo, Houston, we will take the rest of Nick Chubb's 1-year contract from you for a draft pick or whatever they have? So I think that the RB1 talk is, I think, a little premature. And I look at it in phases, right? There's been plenty of running backs in Texans history who have put up one really good game. And to be fair, this is 119 total yards, but it's 69 rushing yards on 4.1 yards per carry. And Nick Chubb actually had 3.5 yards per carry, but he also had a good day. But a touchdown running and a touchdown receiving, he was actually the team's second leading receiver. So in fantasy football and in the modern NFL, a receiving back, really high quality, really good value. You could almost say, 119 yards and not even distinguish between the receiving and rushing yards. That's just really impressive feat from Woody Marks. But can he do it again? That's the real question. We've seen flashes from him that led me to believe that this was possible from him, what he's done so far. Is he going to step up next game and get the lion's share? Because we've seen other teams where, like you said, the Lions, Gibbs will get the lion's share 1 week and then it's David Montgomery. Or if we look at the Patriots, you got Ramondre Stevenson 1 week and then, Travion Henderson the next. And that's kind of like the modern NFL pretty much since like early on in my time watching the league. We went away. The last time that I can think of where there was like a true RB1 scheme being run, and there is like 1 or 2 right now, but like the ones that I remember from growing up are like LaDainian Tomlinson, Adrian Peterson. You had guys that were literally the running back. I think the Cowboys at one point had DeMarco Murray, but even then after they had that, they've pretty much went to a committee, and a lot of teams run that and there's nothing wrong with it. But I do think that, I don't know if RB1 is the conversation. I think that Woody Marks carving out his role and being a significant contributor could be huge for this Texans offense. I think that what he did today basically catapulted this team from like incredibly frustrating offensive performance today to, wow, okay, maybe this was okay. Like he made the difference. Like this Texans offense looked like absolute trash without him in the game. Like even with that one Higgins touchdown, what are you looking at? You're looking at like a 12 to, because they missed the extra point on the one touchdown they got. You're looking at like a 12-0 route, which is like, it's not a route, it's just a shutout. Like the defense won that game and the offense did enough. Whereas those 2 touchdowns from Woody make it, okay, 26-0. The offense showed up. We finally got a game. So yeah, I'm not sure that's the conversation. Speaking of Higgins, so Higgins did have the one 24-yard reception for a touchdown. How do you feel about how much he's been targeted? For some context here, him and Hutchinson are 2 of the best wide receivers in the league when it comes to the advanced stat of creating separation. Higgins being number 1, but Hutchinson's being targeted more. How do you feel about his usage, and what do you think the indication is from seeing him actually get a touchdown, get this long reception, get a target from CJ Stroud?
So I did a post-game show, Houston Sports Talk with Robert Land, and tonight we had a special guest, Jason Braddock, Used to do all sorts of things. Houston Sports Talk Radio. If you're old enough to remember, I think he was on 610 or 790 or both. I know the dude's been in the game for a minute. And we got to talking about Higgins. And the one thing that he said that I did not know that, he shed a lot of light on, and it makes a lot of sense, is the reason he feels that we have not seen Higgins to the length that a lot of people want to see him is his willingness or ability to block. And in a lot of the different things where, screens and different issues with the Texans trying to get the ball out on the perimeter, blocking's huge. I think he made mention of a Woody Mark screen that Woody's probably still running. I think it was like a week or 2 weeks ago, but Higgins whiffed on a block, and that killed that play. So as he's progressed as a blocker, you're getting more of him as a receiver. And I think that's like the big thing that is really driving how much you see him. I think the targets are going to be a byproduct of him being on the field, because CJ's really good about spreading the ball around. So he's starting to block more, and he made mention of a couple key blocks today. I'm sorry. And that just really kept him on the field in order to get the touchdown catch. So I think the needle's pointing up on Higgins. I think we'll see him more as he becomes a more well-rounded receiver. And for me, as a guy that wants to see the young guys develop more than anything, not just put him out there just for the sake of putting him out there, I feel like that's important. If Berrios was healthy, if Kirk was healthy all the time, now he's back, but he wasn't early, maybe we're not talking about it. If Watson was healthy, maybe we're not talking about it, because those guys, would be out there doing the things. Right now, with those guys being out, you really want to see the young guys, especially, with the advancements of Ursary and Woody. You really felt like these two wide receivers were going to be in the mix too. I mean, we've seen Noel in the kick game, but as far as like offensively, it's been kind of like Nico, the tight ends, sprinkle in a little Hutch, and that's all you got. So to really open the playbook all the way up, you really want to have that extra, complimentary wide receiver. And now I guess with him, starting to understand, being willing to block and stick his nose in there, you're going to see him on the field more.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, to speak to your point about wide receiver availability, I think one of the things that really helped out this week was Woody Marks in the short game coming out of the backfield. So to see Christian Kirk step up, who's had a disappointing start to the season from injuries to what he's been able to contribute since getting healthy, I think that'll be massive for this team. And that's a great observation by Jason Braddock. Had the pleasure of having him on the show, and he knows what he's talking about. So I think that's something to track moving forward is how Jaden Higgins does as a blocker. So last thing we'll talk about today is just looking ahead. This Texans team gets their first win against the Titans. We kind of have highlighted it with like playoff odds and such, but how do you feel? And we'll get in depth on the Ravens matchup in our recap later, or our preview later this week. But looking ahead to that matchup, what are some takeaways from this matchup that make you feel good about it? And what are some things that you think make you feel like that matchup might be as bad as people think it's going to be?
Well, obviously the elephant in the room is, Baltimore's really dealing with a lot of injuries right now. The availability of Lamar Jackson right now is, I think, in question. He did not finish the game this afternoon. So he's dealing with a hamstring injury. Houston fans know all about hamstrings from our time watching the Astros. So it could be nothing. It could be something serious. They're also dealing with other injuries on the defensive side of the ball. Kansas City ran the score up on them. It was never close. Which is good for the Texans, right? The Texans' really big struggle right now is scoring points. They ran into a bad defense. They scored points. It looks like Baltimore is not the defense that a lot of people thought they were going to be. Matabuke, another big guy, is on IR for them. Teams are scoring points on Baltimore when in the past they weren't. So,
and Roquan Smith went out injured as well. So just not the best look for that team. So I agree with you. I mean, I think that injuries could play a huge role. And just looking at the grander scope, I think that winning this game is incredibly vital for this Texans team going into a bye week. Going to the bye week at 2-3 is so much more different than going into the bye week 1-4. And I think that the playoff discussion can kick into higher gear if the Texans show, especially like going into Baltimore, winning a game they've never won before. They've never won in Baltimore, would be huge. So, Tom, any final thoughts before we bring this thing to a close?
This was a big win. I can't say that enough. The emergence of Woody Marks is going to be something that we hope continues. You may mention, like, hey, we've seen running backs just have one really good game. We need him to see him do it again. But from what we saw today, I really feel like he put a lot of good stuff on tape. So even if he does 70% of it, even if his pass blocking is elite, and he had some great pass blocking plays.
Pass blocking.
Like even that is just so important for this team that I think the needle's moving in the right direction when you think about the Texans that way.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, my final thoughts are, please keep winning. I think I put out a tweet last week that was like, I think that the Texans winning 17 games in a row could heal any issue in my life right now. So, I mean, I'd take half that number, honest. But
James could have cancer and the Texans win 17 games in a row.
I think that's the cure to cancer, is just your football team winning 17 games in a row, which, for those of you not doing the math, I'm including the postseason in that one. So, yeah, I mean, I think it could feed generations in Houston for sure. The food bank would be overflowing. That's for sure.
I don't want to contract cancer, but I would like to see this, come to fruition for no other reason than science.
Science, yeah, exactly. First science, come on. But yeah, so I'm excited to see how this plays out, and excited to see how the Texans can do in Baltimore. Thanks for tuning into the Bullpen. We do previews, recaps. If you're looking for a podcast home, this is the place to be. If you want your voice heard on Wednesday nights, we are live, and you can pop in on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, wherever you want to get in on the action, so that you can be a part of the discussion. So once again, thank you. I have been James Roy, and you can find me at James Roy NFL wherever you get your social media. Tom is TC Tom1 on Instagram and Third Coast Tom on Twitter. And we are the Bullpen, the #1 veteran-run Texans podcast in the world as far as we know. So as always, stay classy, Houston. Vamos Texans. Thanks for tuning into The Bullpen, a Texans podcast. Please like, comment, subscribe, and follow along for more Texans talk from The Bullpen.
Take the handoff. Stroud looking.